Picture an engineer sitting in her office in Austin. It's mid-July 2026, and she's opening up her company's cloud console to spin up a fresh server. The list of operating systems loads on her screen, and right there, sitting comfortably next to the usual names everyone recognizes, is an option built entirely by a company that once treated open collaboration as a threat to be neutralized. She clicks it without thinking twice. It's just another item on a drop-down menu now. But pause on that image for a second, because a quarter century ago, that same click would have been unthinkable. It would have been front-page tech news. The company quietly offering its own version of this once-rejected technology is the very same company whose top executive once stood in front of a reporter and compared it, on the record, to a disease. So here's the actual question this breakdown is going to answer. Did this company genuinely have a change of heart? Or are we watching right now the most patient and disciplined absorption of an open technology the tech industry has ever witnessed? There's an old internal memo, leaked decades ago, that completely reframes how you should read what this company just announced this summer. We'll get to it. And once you see it, you'll understand why some of the most seasoned engineers in the field aren't cheering this news. They're taking careful notes instead. Start with a number that should genuinely stop you in your tracks. As of this year, more than 2/3 of all customer computing power running on this company's own cloud platform is running on the open source operating system it once tried to bury, not on its own proprietary system. This was confirmed directly at a major open source conference in Minneapolis this past May, where the company stated plainly that the infrastructure behind its productivity suite, its code hosting platform, and even the AI tools built on top of it all run on that same open foundation. Sit with what that actually means. The core engine generating the revenue currently propping up this company's stock price depends entirely on an operating system it spent a decade publicly trying to destroy. Every time a customer pays for a cloud subscription, there's a real chance the machine handling that request isn't running the company's own flagship software at all. This company has effectively been an open source operator for years. It just never said so out loud. And this year, it finally did. At that same summit, the company unveiled a brand new general purpose Linux distribution, built from a well-known open source base, maintained internally, and released into public preview for any customer who wants to run it on any virtual machine in their cloud. This isn't some stripped-down back-end tool hidden inside a container pipeline. This is a full, general-purpose operating system built from a recent upstream snapshot, using the same package manager the open source community itself relies on, with every modification from the original code documented publicly for anyone to inspect. Alongside it, the company pushed out a second release, a locked-down, read-only container platform built specifically to run underneath massive AI training clusters, where one vulnerable package spread across 10,000 machines could be catastrophic. This pairing represents something this company has genuinely never done before. It isn't contributing to someone else's open source project anymore. It's a vendor of it now, with its own name stamped on the label. This is where the story turns uncomfortable, and where you need to travel back in time to understand what you're looking at. To understand 2026, you first need to understand a memo written in August of 1998 by a program manager inside this very company. He wrote a confidential internal document for two of the company's most senior executives describing open source software as a dangerous new development model. It was marked strictly confidential, never meant to leave the building. 2 months later, someone leaked it to a well-known figure in the open source world who published it on Halloween night. It's been known ever since as the first of what became a series of leaked memos. And what it said inside was extraordinary. The author wasn't dismissing the open source movement as a toy. He was warning leadership that it represented the first development model in software history genuinely capable of threatening the company's entire intellectual property-based revenue engine. He was scared. And history would go on to prove he had every reason to be. Inside that memo, he laid out 3 possible strategies for neutralizing the threat. The third one was given an internal code name that has since become one of the most infamous phrases in the entire history of the tech industry: embrace, extend, extinguish. The mechanics were simple and brutally effective. First, embrace the open technology publicly, support it, join its community, build genuine trust. Second, extend it. Build your own proprietary version layered on top, with extra features that only work properly inside your own ecosystem. Third, extinguish. Once enough developers and companies have standardized on your extended version, the original open version starts falling behind, fragments, and your version quietly becomes the default everyone depends on. This wasn't rumor. It was a documented internal strategy, later authenticated by the company itself, and eventually entered as evidence in a federal antitrust case. And here's the detail that should really unsettle you. This exact playbook had already been run once before, years earlier, against a company most people under 30 have never even heard of. That earlier target built the web browser that introduced most of the world to the internet in the first place. By the mid-1990s, it dominated how people got online. This company looked at that dominance and decided it was an existential threat, so it ran the play exactly as it would later be. Documented in that memo, it embraced the browser concept, building its own competing version. It extended it with deep, exclusive integration into its own operating system that made it perform better there than any rival ever could. And within about 5 years, the original browser company was gone, sold off in pieces, its once dominant product reduced to an open source afterthought. A federal judge ultimately ruled that this company had illegally maintained its monopoly through anti-competitive conduct. Fast forward to the year the story actually starts to shift, 2014, when a new CEO took over. Almost immediately, he said 3 words nobody inside the company had ever said publicly before: "We love this technology." The signal was unmistakable. The old combative posture was being retired. 2 years later, the company joined the foundation governing that open source project as a paying platinum member, buying a permanent seat on the board that helps fund the very engineers maintaining the core project. That same year, it shipped a tool bringing a genuine version of that environment directly inside its own operating system for developers for the first time in company history. Then came the acquisition most casual observers still underestimate, buying the world's largest code hosting platform for billions in stock. That platform isn't just a website for storing code. It's functionally the front door of the entire open source world, hosting hundreds of millions of public projects with over 1 billion contributions logged in a single year. Acquiring it meant acquiring the infrastructure sitting underneath nearly every open source project on the planet. By 2019, the open source operating system was already running more machines on this company's cloud than its own proprietary system was. And now, this year, the final and most public step arrived. The company didn't just contribute to someone else's project anymore. It shipped its own, under its own name, optimized to run best on its own cloud. Real engineering contributions have flowed upstream too, kernel improvements and driver work that genuinely benefit the broader community. That part is real and worth crediting. But consider the consequence sitting underneath the generosity. Any team that standardizes its infrastructure on this new offering is running a system built by this company, tuned specifically for this company's cloud, and increasingly difficult to walk away from without serious re-engineering. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's simply how vendor-specific infrastructure has always worked. The pattern isn't limited to server rooms either. At its developer conference this summer, the company announced it's bringing dozens of native command line tools, rewritten from the ground up, directly into its own desktop operating system. The same fundamental utilities that have quietly run on nearly every server on the planet for 30 years are now being folded straight into the core of the product that once existed, by design, to compete against them. Lay the pattern out plainly, and it becomes impossible to unsee. Embrace: public love; foundation membership, a landmark acquisition. Extend: a homegrown distribution, a lockdown container. Platform: native tools folded into the desktop. And the third step from that 1998 memo was extinguish. Nobody serious is claiming we've arrived there, and there's a real credible argument we may never get there at all. There are genuinely 2 futures consistent with everything just described. And it's worth laying out both fairly, because exaggerating either one does you no favors. In the first, this transformation is completely genuine. A new leader inherited a company that had spent a decade losing fights it never should have. Picked, looked honestly at where the entire industry had gone, and concluded that long-term survival depended on becoming a real part of the ecosystem it once fought. Under that reading, every acquisition, every board, seat, every new release represents a company that recognized it was already too late to extinguish anything meaningful and chose instead to compete by becoming genuinely useful. In the second future, the old memo isn't a dusty artifact. It's a roadmap that got interrupted by an antitrust case before its third step could be completed, only to resume decades later in a quieter, more patient form, pursued through convenience rather than force. In this reading, the extinguish step was never abandoned. It was simply redesigned to look nothing like the version that got a company dragged into federal court the first time around. The honest answer, sitting between these 2 futures, is that both can be true at exactly the same time, and that's what makes this story genuinely difficult, rather than a simple hero or villain narrative. History's oldest rule about corporations applies here with unusual precision. Watch what a company actually does over time, not what it says in a keynote. So where does that actually leave you, whether you're a developer, an IT decision maker, or simply someone who's watched this industry long enough to remember when these 2 names were treated as contradictory in the same sentence? The honest answer isn't a dramatic warning to avoid this new offering altogether, because that would be an overreaction the evidence doesn't fully support. It's a well-built, genuinely open, actively maintained system with real engineering credibility behind it. And dismissing it outright because of what happened to a rival company 25 years ago would be its own kind of intellectual laziness. But the honest answer also isn't blind enthusiasm either, because the goodwill carefully built over the last decade shouldn't erase the memory of what this company documented about its own intentions when it thought nobody outside the building would ever read those words. The healthiest approach, the one this ecosystem was designed to make possible in the first place, is the same one experienced engineers have quietly applied to every vendor claim for decades. Trust, but verify. Read the commits. Track the upstream contributions. Watch the licensing terms over time, not just at launch. Pay close attention to whether this stays genuinely portable, or whether a few years from now, convenience gently tightens into dependency. So here's the real question worth sitting with. Is a company capable of documenting its own predatory playbook in writing, and then spending the next 25 years slowly becoming something else entirely? Or does history simply not work that way for companies of this size, no matter how much good faith engineering gets pushed upstream along the way? Tell me honestly which side of that argument you land on, because this debate is nowhere near settled inside the industry itself,